In a quiet corner of Brambleberry Wood, where bluebells swayed in the breeze and the trees whispered secrets to one another, lived a young squirrel named Nutty. He was not called Nutty because he was crazy, though some of the older animals did have doubts, but because of his undying love for acorns. Nutty had a soft, cinnamon-coloured tail, bright eyes full of mischief, and paws that were always dusty from digging. He lived in an old oak tree with his grandmother, Granny Hazel, who spent her days knitting mossy blankets and telling stories about the forest back in the olden days. One sunny morning, Nutty was perched on a branch, nibbling a pine cone, when Granny Hazel called up to him. One sunny morning, Nutty was perched on a branch, nibbling a pine cone, when Granny Hazel called up to him. Nutty, my dear, did you remember to gather acorns for winter? Nutty blinked. Not quite yet, Granny Hazel tutted, shaking her head so that her spectacles slipped down her nose. Autumn's nearly over. What will we do if the snow comes early? Autumn's nearly over. What will we do if the snow comes early? Nutty leapt down from the tree in a flurry of fur and determination. Don't worry, Granny, I'll go on a proper hunt today, the biggest acorn hunt Brambleberry has ever seen. Don't get distracted, Granny said, but Nutty was already off, his tail bobbing behind him. Don't get distracted, Granny said, but Nutty was already off, his tail bobbing behind him. Nutty scampered through the woodland paths, pausing at Old Hollow Stump, where the animals often left messages. A few squirrels had drawn acorn symbols in the dirt, pointing towards the hill. Encouraged, Nutty made his way up Acorn Rise, a sunny knoll that overlooked the rest of the wood. There he met his friend Tilly, a shy hedgehog with a nose for truffles and a fondness for reading. There he met his friend Tilly, a shy hedgehog with a nose for truffles and a fondness for reading. Tilly, have you seen any acorns about? Nutty asked, bouncing in place. Tilly blinked slowly. There's a spot near Willow Pond where I saw some yesterday, but you'll need a guide. The ground's soggy and full of twisting roots. Nutty grinned. Then you're coming with me. Nutty grinned. Then you're coming with me. Together they made their way to Willow Pond. On the way, they met Barry the Badger, who was carrying a satchel full of beetroot. On the way, they met Barry the Badger, who was carrying a satchel full of beetroot. Off to hunt acorns, are you? Barry chuckled. Mind the crows, they've been nicking food from everyone's stores. Nasty bunch, those lot. Tilly frowned. That's not very fair. It isn't, Barry agreed. Tell you what, if you find enough acorns, come by my den later. I'll trade you for some turnips. I'll trade you for some turnips. Deal, Nutty beamed. Willow Pond was beautiful in the autumn light. The golden reeds rustled and frogs croaked somewhere in the shadows. Nutty scampered along the muddy edge, eyes peeled. I see one, he cried, pointing with his paw. I see one, he cried, pointing with his paw. Sure enough, beneath a fallen log, a whole cluster of acorns lay waiting, half buried in the earth. Nutty dove in and began digging with wild enthusiasm. Suddenly, a shadow passed overhead. Tilly squeaked and hid behind a bush. A crow landed on a nearby branch. It wore a shiny button on a string like a medal. It wore a shiny button on a string like a medal. Well, well, it cawed. Looks like the squirrels struck gold. Nutty puffed up. These acorns are for winter. You can't have them. The crow tilted its head. Finders keepers, Flufftail. Before Nutty could protest, more crows landed, 3 of them, and began hopping around menacingly. Tilly stood up, shaking slightly. We found them fair and square. The lead crow sneered. We don't do fair. Just then, a loud growl echoed across the pond. Just then, a loud growl echoed across the pond. Barry had returned. Off with you, he bellowed, swiping the air with a great paw. The crows squawked and flapped away, feathers scattering. Are you all right? Barry asked, helping Nutty up. Nutty nodded, panting. Thanks, Barry. I didn't think they'd come so fast. Better stick together, Barry said. Let's find you some safer ground. Later that afternoon, after a snack of berries and turnip slices, the trio headed towards the heart of Brambleberry Wood. There, hidden behind a curtain of ivy, they discovered a grove none of them had seen before. The trees were short and gnarled, but absolutely loaded with acorns. The trees were short and gnarled, but absolutely loaded with acorns. Nutty's eyes went wide. It's an acorn paradise. Quiet, Tilly whispered. There might be others nearby. They crept in cautiously, and to their delight, the grove appeared deserted. They got to work gathering acorns in little piles. Barry used an old basket, Tilly filled her scarf, and Nutty stuffed his cheeks until he looked like he'd been stung by a bee. Hours passed. The sun dipped low. The piles grew higher. But suddenly a rustling came from the underbrush. But suddenly a rustling came from the underbrush. Who's there? Nutty called. A small voice replied, Please don't hurt us. Out stepped 2 tiny field mice, trembling. Behind them, 3 more peeped from the leaves. Behind them, 3 more peeped from the leaves. We've been living here, said the eldest. The crows took our stores. We've only just begun collecting again. Nutty's ears drooped. He looked at their little paws, empty and tired. Then you can have half of what we've gathered, he said firmly. Tilly blinked. Are you sure? Nutty nodded. Granny always says a winter shared is a winter survived. Granny always says a winter shared is a winter survived. The mice looked like they might cry. Thank you, truly. By the time they returned to the oak tree, the stars were twinkling above. Nutty's basket was still full, even after sharing, and his heart felt as warm as a toasted chestnut. Granny Hazel was waiting by the door with a lantern. There you are! I was beginning to worry. There you are! I was beginning to worry. Nutty hugged her. We found the biggest pile of acorns ever, and we made friends, and we stood up to the crows. Granny smiled and fussed over them all, pouring warm blackberry tea and setting out seed cakes. Granny smiled and fussed over them all, pouring warm blackberry tea and setting out seed cakes. Barry returned home with turnips and stories, and Tilly stayed the night wrapped in a moss blanket by the fire. As the flames crackled, Nutty looked out the window. The wind was picking up, a whisper of winter to come. But he wasn't afraid. He had food, friends, and a forest full of hidden wonders. And tomorrow he might even find more.